A very special guest today, which is our guest speaker, Pastor Cristian Caput. I was practicing this with him like 2 minutes ago. No. I'd promised I wasn't going to call him Cappuccino. I will let him say his own surname. But yeah, welcome along. I was just saying to someone as we were talking beforehand, it's so nice to be in spring, isn't it? Winter has passed. I think some of the winter feeling may be with us for a while, but the coldest days should technically be over, which is lovely. For those of you joining us for the first time, just some housekeeping things. So if you're needing the bathrooms, they're located just around the front doors you would have entered, just either side. So the gentlemen's bathrooms are just past the reception desk on the other side, and the female ones are just opposite the kitchen doorway. They're all very well signposted, so if you need to use those, you'll know where they are. Also, the exit is exactly where you came through to enter, so nice and easy. And you don't need the card to get back down, so you can be reunited with your car or train station at the end of the day. You may also not be aware, but we do have a camera, so we do film our services and programs, and they're actually available on our YouTube channel. And I got a text just before I stood up here that my grandma was looking us up to tune in, so if you found us, hi Grandma. But if you are wanting to look at any of the programs we've done in the past, or because we do have this special program that's running over the next 2 weekends, so this weekend and next weekend, and we'll be having hearing from Cristian on Saturday and Friday night and Saturday of next week as well. So if you're not able to make it in for one of those days but still want to hear what's been said or tune in to Cristian, you can find us on YouTube later as well. We will also be having a dinner together after the program, so if you want to stay for that, very welcome. There'll be some soup, buns and sandwiches, so that'll be being prepared in the kitchen. What else? Oh, I'll tell you a little bit about Pastor Cristian. So he has living in Melbourne now. He's got a lovely wife and 2 young daughters. One of his favourite things about living in Melbourne is the great variety of food, which I can certainly second, having moved here myself just a few months ago, and I'm steadily working my way through Melbourne's delicious menu, but it's an eternal quest, I think. Never quite at the end, because they just keep opening new cafes for me to try. And you will also be getting to try some great food over the next 2 weekends here, Cristian, because we will have some lunches and dinners here, so that'll be nice. And also he was saying that he really likes all the parks in Melbourne and taking his daughters to the park, and I know myself, it's really nice living in a city where there are still so many places to go that are green and trees, which just does make such a difference, so that's really nice. I think that's about all, so I'll hand over to Sam, who's going to come up and just do another activity with us. But yeah, certainly sincerely welcome along to everyone, and really glad you could join us. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam. I think I said hello to most of you as you came in, and it's lovely to have you here this evening. I'm so used to saying this afternoon. The slide does say getting to know you, and it does say Samantha Ireland and Michael Brady, who is my husband. He has abandoned me to do this on my own because he's downstairs greeting and letting people in, which I have to admit is an important job, so I won't hold it against him. Now, I thought, given that it's the end of a long week, I won't make you do anything too energetic or too scary, but it can be nice, given that some of us are here for the first time and some of us are meeting each other either for the first time or recently, that we might just spend a little bit of time getting to know just one person. I won't challenge you to go around to everyone, but just one person. So what I thought we might do is find somebody who maybe you don't know or don't know so well, and just share 2 things with them. One thing might be something good that's happened to you this week, because I don't know about you, but weeks tend to fly by really fast. Often I end up feeling quite exhausted and stressed by the end of a Friday, and I don't actually stop and think of the good things that have happened. So if we can think of maybe one good thing, even if it's something really small that we can reflect on and share, and that might share a little bit in turn about who we are and what we do and things like that. And then the other thing I thought we could share, perhaps, is a prayer request that we might have that person can take away with them for the week. because often we do these activities and we introduce ourselves and we go and sit back down and we kind of don't give it a second thought. And I thought it could be really nice to keep the person that we've met in our thoughts and in our prayers for the week to come. Now, if prayer is a new concept to you or not something you believe in necessarily, that's completely fine as well. And certainly there are people that would be more than happy to speak to you later about what it involves, and if you have any questions. But it's also, I think, about just keeping each other in our thoughts as well as the weeks go by. So does that sound doable and not too scary? I'm an introvert, so I don't generally ask people to do things that are too scary that I wouldn't do myself. So how about if we do that? We spend maybe, 5 minutes or so, and then we'll come back together. But yeah, cool. That was a good way to end, wasn't it? Yeah, but cool. Thanks, guys.
Sorry to interrupt all the conversations that are going on. So we decided to have a theme song this time around. I think some of the feedback from our previous programming was just a desire to engage in worship and singing. And so for those of you who are familiar with the song, I'll invite you to sing with us. And for those of you who are not familiar, it's okay to just enjoy the worship. So our theme song, as you know, the program is about what it means to know and follow Jesus. And so this weekend we're going to be singing the well-known song, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Oh, soul, are you weary and troubled? No light in the darkness you see. There's light for a look at the Savior, and life more abundant and free. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. Through death into life everlasting, He passed and we follow Him there. O'er us sin no more had dominion, for more than conquerors we are. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. His word shall not fail you, He promised. Believe Him and all will be well. Then go to a world that is dying, His perfect salvation to tell. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely
and thank you. Speaking of school days, I wanted to start with some recollections from my childhood. When I was growing up, I experienced a lot of health issues. When I was in grade 6, out of a total school calendar year, I was off school 75 days. I don't know if there's that many days in, a term? Probably about a term of my entire grade 6. I was off sick. I'd get sick quite quickly, quite easily, headaches, fevers, temperatures. Went to hospital a few times, hallucinating, talking about the American Indians chasing me, getting me, all sorts of crazy things. I wasn't on anything particular at the time. I was too young for that. But being in hospital a few times, you'd observe, you'd watch, you'd see a number of different things. And one of the things I noticed is every time somebody touched me or touched something I was doing, what would the staff have to do? What would they have to do every time they touched somebody in hospital? They'd have to wash hands. A perpetual washing of hands. Now they've got those levers, you know, the ones that you use with your elbows, but you still have to touch them. So it got me thinking. I was about 12 at the time. I'd spent a little bit of time in hospital. And one of the ideas that came to mind was to invent a system, and I wasn't too cluey on science, on electricity or anything like that, but invent a system where you'd put your hands under the tap and there was some sort of sensor that would activate the water flow. Have you seen anything like that? Well, they do have them now, but they didn't 20 years ago. So I saw myself as a little bit of an inventor, and the internet hadn't really hit the market in full swing by then. Do you remember the V90 modems, the dial-ups, 56K, that make those funny noises? Well, that was about the extent of the internet, so you couldn't do a lot of research. But I joined this Young Inventors Association, talked to lots of people, and in doing that, I started to get a little bit more of an interest in science. And as I was doing that, I came across over-unity. Have you heard of over-unity before? Well, over-unity is the term that people in the know use for perpetual motion. Is that a little bit more familiar to us, perpetual motion? I'm going to put an example of perpetual motion on the screen here in case you haven't seen or experienced anything like this before. The concept of perpetual motion is where you can start a machine, some sort of contraption, and when you put it together or move things in such a way, it just keeps on going on and on and on forever without providing any sort of electricity or input into it. Can you imagine what that would do for the energy industry? It would revolutionize the way we do coal gas seams, the way we produce electricity, wind turbines, wave. Everything would be revolutionized by the concept of perpetual motion. This is an example of a perpetual motion machine, and the idea is that you get more energy out of a system than you put in. In layman's terms, it's like going to a vending machine and putting $1 in and getting out what? $2. You'd be there all day, wouldn't you? Like this machine here. As you move the magnet a little bit closer, you can see the machine just keeps on spinning, and there's no electricity, there are no batteries, there is nothing that is making this spin artificially except for the magnet and the ball there. Pretty cool, eh? Imagine having something like that power your home. Pretty exciting. I spent quite a few months looking at books in the library, talking to teachers in school, and doing anything and everything I could to learn more about it. And I actually thought I would be the one that would make a machine that would work. And the more I talked to people in the know, everybody told me that something like this is absolutely impossible. Why do you think it might be impossible? I had it as the first, it could be the second. One of the laws of thermodynamics, which says what? I only remember because I looked it up recently, so I don't remember from my physics days either, don't worry. But the laws of thermodynamics talk about conservation, and the first law is about the conservation of energy. In other words, you cannot create or destroy energy, simply transfer it. Doing something like this is really a creation of energy. Now, that video that I just showed you looked pretty cool, didn't it? What you don't see for most of these videos, and I actually saw some exposés on this, that there's usually a fan or somebody with an air pump that presses the trigger to spin the wheel at just the right time. And it looks good on video, but in reality, it doesn't seem to work. Now, I thought that that wasn't, it was a dream that would never be pursued, and, the laws of thermodynamics were going to stifle my ambition to be the next Einstein. But then just recently, this gentleman came on the scene, Sean McCarthy. Anybody heard of Sean McCarthy? He's from Dublin, in Ireland. And he started a company called Stay On. He's been going at it for about 5-7 years or so. And he's came up with 2 retail devices. One was called the O Cube. This one here. Don't ask me why it's called the O Cube. It doesn't look like much of a cube, but so it is. And that's the O Phone. And his promise is that the O Cube, can you see the little USB charging port there? The O Cube would charge devices in perpetuity, over unity, forever. Now, it's a little bit big and wieldy, but can you imagine having one of those in your backpack, your computer bag, in your handbag? You never have to worry about losing a charge, and you never have to plug it in, because he's found an amazing way to do that. Are you familiar with crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, Kickstarter? So he did something like this. He raised about $30 million. And then one of the next devices he came up with was the O Phone. Now, it's a very simple phone. It doesn't do everything your iPhone or your Samsung or your Windows phone can do. But the beauty about this phone is that it never, ever has to be charged. It has one of these perpetual motion systems inside, an over-unity device or mechanism, that means that forever and eternity, you can always make phones. They put it up on their website. The O Cube costs €1,200, so close to 2,000 Australian dollars. But if you never had to charge again, it would be worth it. And the O Phone that I showed earlier costs about €400, 600-700 Australian dollars. Literally thousands of people around the world have invested in it. Earlier this year, 2016, was the last time that Sean McCarthy ever posted anything on Facebook. Nobody knows where he is. Nobody has ever heard of him since. And there are people still posting on his Facebook page saying, we hope you're okay, and they believe in a lot of conspiracy theories that somebody's kidnapped him. It could be aliens. It could be all sorts of things. And I really do wish that somebody would invent something like this, but they're really fighting against the very laws of nature, being the laws of thermodynamics, where you cannot create, you cannot destroy energy, but simply transfer it. Now, when it comes to our day-to-day living, when it comes to our lives, we are all far more mature than to think that we're going to live forever, right? We want to. When you're in your late teens, in your early 20s, you don't even think about the end, right? We think about the present, and we really have a little bit of an indestructible attitude. We're going to be here for a long time. We're almost going to live forever. At least we don't really think about the end or too far down the track. When you hit 30, maybe 40, you start to ponder, reflect. You start to realize that, hey, maybe life is going to slow down sooner or later. I was working on a little promo production with a film producer a few weeks ago, and he was a young guy. And I said I needed somebody middle-aged for a particular, a particular acting session. And really serious, he said to me, middle-aged, what's that, about 30, 31? I just turned 33 the other day, so I didn't think it was really funny. I said to him, middle age is probably, late 50s, early 60s, maybe late 60s, you push the frontiers. Now, we know that we're not going to live technically forever. We have family, we have friends, we have grandparents, we visit them in retirement villages, we've been to funerals. We know that life eventually slows down and fizzles out. But one of the things that we still hope for, one of the things that we still desire, is maybe not necessarily to live in this life forever, but to at least be content, to be at peace, to have satisfaction, to have purpose, to have a reason for living on a regular basis. We want that. We have some good moments in life, don't we? And when those good moments come, none of us are thinking, I can't wait till they finish. Can't wait till it's over. Life's too good. Give me some challenges, give me some trials, some hurricanes, some disaster, some illness. We want those things to last. It's almost like we're created with a desire for happiness, a desire for eternity, a desire to keep going, maybe even if it's not just living forever, but at least for the good times to last, for the contentment, the peace, the passion, the purpose, the direction and the drive in life to be something that continues and continues and continues. How do we have that? Can we experience that? Is it even possible? We're going to spend a little bit of time getting to know a character from history. I'm going to call him Sully. Sully lived several thousand years ago, a real historical figure. We're starting to uncover some archaeological things about him. And when Sully got into middle age, in his early 30s, his father passed away, and he inherited, just in gold alone, today's equivalent of $250 billion. Just his gold wealth. Every single year, he received taxes, he received tributes, he received gifts. Just his annual gold receipts totaled $1.5 billion. If you were to go to Google and type the world's wealthiest people throughout history, almost every single list by your average blogger, as well as anthropologist, as well as anybody with a little bit of experience, as well as Time and BBC and all sorts of reputable sources, list him as probably the wealthiest person that ever lived, with a net wealth of over $2 trillion in conservative terms. Wouldn't be bad to find yourself at around 30 inheriting around $2 trillion. In fact, he had so much gold that silver was of no consequence. Historians describe it as common as pebbles or gravel. If you walked through his domain and you saw a silver coin on the ground, you wouldn't even bother to pick it up. It was that common, it had so little value. Have you ever seen those memes on the internet or little clips that say if Bill Gates stopped to pick up a $100 note, he'd be losing money? Have you seen those? There's more value for him to keep walking and thinking than actually stopping up to pick that $100 note. Well, for me, there's a lot of value in picking up that $100 note. Not for Bill Gates and definitely not for Sully. That was the kind of guy he was. The domain he ruled was at the center of the known world. Very different map to the kind of map that we have now, but it was roughly here somewhere on the Mediterranean coast of the Middle East. Today, it's not such a prominent place because of the way we use transportation. If you want to get from A to B, you use a plane generally. Ships are for luxury, they're for cruises, they're for cargo. They're not the most effective way for regular transport. So we fly over most of these places without even noticing. If you've ever been to Europe and flown through Asia, you'll fly somewhere through here on your way to Milan, on your way to Rome, to Paris, or to London. 3,000 years ago, at the height of Sully's domain, this little strip of land was the center of the known universe. From wherever in the world, the known world that you wanted to travel, if you came by land, you would usually stick to the coast, more fertile, more resources. It was a better place to be and to travel. And so you would travel past this strip. You wouldn't go through here because the desert conditions were so significant that you would die. People did not cross through the Saudi Arabia Peninsula desert there. So you would always come through this narrow strip of land to get anywhere moving east. If you wanted to go north and you couldn't afford to go by boat, or it was risky, or you had more cargo, or it was cheaper again, you would make your route this way. Now even ships, even boats would come through here and dock in ports on this little strip of land to make their way east for the spice trade, for the silk trade, for all sorts of other bits and pieces. So to be geographically in this place explains why he was able, and his father was able, to leave him such a significant wealth. It was the center of the world. It was where all trade happened, all commerce happened, all good things happened through that part of the world. When you have that much money, you need to turn your attention to, I guess, more important things. And one of the things that he did quite early was to turn his attention to academia. If I had to guess, he probably got a law degree first to make sure that he knew how to retain and keep his funds and make sure he'd be able to distribute his vast fortune well. But we know that he studied things like chemistry, physics, astronomy, biology. He studied literature, anatomy, you name it, he studied it, because with that sort of money, he was able to obviously amass wise people from all over the world who would come teach him, train him, and his benefit compared to all of the wise people that would teach him things was that he was learning things in more domains than each one of those individuals were teaching him, and he was able to compare and cross-examine things from different fields. And he became not just one of the wealthiest men on earth, definitely the wealthiest, but also one of the most intelligent, one of the most capable, wisest people on earth. We know he wrote large volumes of books. Sadly, we've lost a lot of those, but he was someone who was healthy, wealthy, and wise to the nth degree, something we can only hope for. He's in his mid-30s now. He's a clever guy. He's a very rich guy. And he decides to turn his attention to another more important matter. What do you think that might be? What happens sort of, 40 years ago, this happened in your late teens, early 20s. Now it's happening in your late 20s, early 30s. A few more years might be late 30s, early 40s. Where does the attention turn? Marriage. So he decides to turn to the romantic aspects of life, but there's a problem, and we see this in the media. If you ever watch movies, or even if you don't, you see this with your friends. Someone who's extremely wealthy, who's extremely smart, who's extremely good looking, how easy is it for them to find the right person? Why? There would be so many women that would want him for what? For his character. Right? There would be so many women that would want him for the absolute wrong reason. And how could you really tell? Maybe a blind date? Maybe The Bachelor? Undercover? He goes undercover. He does. He actually writes a book about this. He goes undercover. He dresses as a commoner, as someone in some really old clothes. You know how you can go on eBay and buy vintage clothes for more than new ones? Well, he did something like that. He sneaks out one of the back doors of one of his vast estates, mingles with the crowds, and does this for months. Getting to know commoners, traveling through his cities, through the countryside. He comes to this particular place, high up in the hills, some distance from his primary residence. And there he bumps into a young woman looking after sheep. Bit of a darker complexion than him. As he does, he starts talking to her. And you know what they say? It was love at first sight. She doesn't know who he is. He spins a lovely yarn about him being some, poor farmer across 2-3 hills who's lost a donkey. He's looking for it. And they start chatting. They talk. He comes back a week later. And he makes a habit for about 7-8 months. Every 2-3 weeks, he'll come back and they'll spend a few hours together. They are really in love. He admires her courage, her commitment, her duty. She's a good woman. They get along well. And then one day, he leaves and doesn't come back for about 3-4 months. She's heartbroken. She doesn't know what happened. She had thought he was the one. He didn't have a lot to offer her, but hey, she was a shepherdess. And in case you think a shepherdess or a shepherd was something cool, it was the worst job you could have in the ancient world. Everybody else got to work indoors or close to a farm or something like that. The shepherds had to go out in the fields, far away from home, with stinky, dirty, smelly sheep, stay in the bad weather, and live their lives out there. So if you had an IQ below 20, or if you were a woman, or if you were the youngest child of 20 children, then you got to be a shepherd. So she wasn't too worried that this guy is a poor farmer who lost his donkey, and she's quite content to spend the rest of her life with him, but he doesn't turn up. A month, 2, 3 go by. She's worried, she's concerned. In today's equivalent, it's like messaging your husband or your girlfriend or your boyfriend and not getting a reply in 2 minutes. It's a disaster. You know something's wrong, right? You just know, you have this feeling that you've put your foot in it. Something's not right. Months pass. Her brothers, and she's got quite a few brothers, let her know one day that there is a huge caravan, a procession, coming from the capital city. And rumor has it that the king's passing through the area. She begs and pleads, can I come? Can I come join on the streets? You know how crowds stay and wave and look and admire? Please let me be part of that crowd. And her brothers say, no, you've got to be with the sheep. And she insists and she begs and she starts crying. She's with the sheep all the time. Why can't she once in a lifetime get to watch the procession that's passing through? Her brothers lose their patience and actually, they don't beat her up to a pulp, but they beat her up enough to leave her bruised and bleeding and send her back to the sheep. She goes out, but she knows when the procession's coming, and she risks everything because, after all, what does she have to live for? Her beloved is gone. Her family aren't exactly very fond of her. She's been relegated to looking after the sheep. So she leaves the sheep in the field by themselves and goes out, somewhere at a distance from where her brothers are waiting on the procession, to see the king passing by. And as the caravan approaches, it slows down and stops right in front of her. And guess who steps down? True story. They almost live happily ever after. She becomes the beloved of the king. Her brothers aren't laughing anymore. And this king who has the world at his feet believes that he's going to live happily ever after. What more could you want? All the money in the world, wiser than anybody that's lived, and finally he's found the love of his life who loves him for who he is and not because of his money, wealth, or particularly good looks. Not long after that, they're expecting their first child. And when it's time for the baby to be born, both mother and child die. And the guy's heartbroken, literally. No amount of money, no wisdom, no genius, no family, no nothing can ever bring her back. He doesn't think he's ever going to find anybody else like her. He's shattered. And, you know, maybe we haven't gone through anything quite that traumatic, but you know what it's like. You have high hopes. Could be a relationship, it could be career, could be a promotion at work, could be financial attainment. And sometimes things just don't go to plan. And sometimes, even when you get there, once you get to the mountaintop, what happens? It's time for the next one, something else. It doesn't seem to quite satisfy, but this is probably as bad as it gets. He decides to look for meaning, for purpose, for passion, for pleasure, for a reason to live beyond his beloved in anything and everything he can get his hands on. And he starts to live, I guess, a playboy lifestyle. And when I mean a playboy lifestyle, Hugh Hefner has nothing on this guy. Back in those cultures, they believed in polygamy. You could marry more than one person, especially if you were the richest man on earth. You could afford a lot of weddings, right? The reason they banned polygamy in our society is not to send us bankrupt. So he ends up marrying 700 women. And then after 700, he loses count and he decides that's too many mother-in-laws to feed and to look after. And he decides to have another 300 playmates on top of that, official playmates, plus the who knows how many others that are, spending time at the palace at all hours of the night. He does that for a few years, parties hard, and literally in his own words he says, I tried everything to have satisfaction, to have joy, and to make it last. Because sure, even, you go down to the local corner store and out the back next to the bins you find the dealer who sells ice and you take a little bit of ice and that makes you feel really good, doesn't it? But the problem with it is what? It doesn't last and it has side effects. And that's what he goes through over and over and over again, literally for decades, till he becomes a really old man. And when he becomes a really old man, after he's tried anything and everything, imagine with that sort of money, what couldn't you do with $2 trillion? I mean, you could buy quite a number of countries and all the people that live in them. He writes a book as a closing testament of his life, and we're going to read a little bit of some of the things he describes. It's in the Bible, it's in Ecclesiastes, and we're going to read pretty much the entire first chapter. It almost reads like poetry. It's not a difficult, not a heavy read. And as we read it, I think all of us in our lives can relate to some of the things that this gentleman experienced. In verse 1 there he says, "The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north, round and round and returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than anyone can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. Nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new, it was here already long ago, it was here before our time? No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them." Doesn't that just lift your spirits? Doesn't that just make you want to live life to the full? Isn't that just encouraging? You wake up in the morning and you start and you read this passage every single day for some get up and go, right? After his wealth, his genius, his talent, his influence, after 700 wives, 300 playmates, and countless others, after everything under the sun, his conclusion is what? It doesn't satisfy. It's meaningless. I've tried, and I've been trying. And it wasn't a year or two or three, it was 30, 40 years with everything at my disposal. But he's not finished yet. It gets better. "I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened, what is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge, and I applied myself for the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is chasing after the wind, for which much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief." The more you try to solve this problem, the more you look for answers, the more you try to be happy, to have satisfaction, purpose, direction, the more emptiness, the more meaninglessness, the more nothingness, he says. And often we don't like to learn from the mistakes of others because we think we know better, right? Especially as children. And then we get into our teens and our, young adulthood, and we don't really take it from others. And we always say, well, my life is going to be different. But this guy, he had every opportunity. There was nothing lacking. There was nothing he didn't try, he didn't do, he couldn't have done. Everything. And at the end of it, he says, absolutely meaningless. Now he continues on through a few more chapters of really repeating the same thing. He goes through example after example. Family life, home life, marriage, fun, you name it, it doesn't last. It's not compelling, it doesn't satisfy, it doesn't fulfill. In verse 3, chapter 3, verse 11, he makes another interesting statement. And he says, He, this is God, has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. He makes a comment there that's quite profound. He says, God has created us, or has put in our hearts eternity. So the desire to live forever, the desire to have good things, the desire for perpetuity. But at the same time, we've got this desire, but what happens when we try to satisfy and be fulfilled while continuing to live, even if it was to live forever? We often find that it's meaningless. The good thing is he concludes on a positive note. We're going to go right to the end of that particular book that he wrote, chapter 12, and we're going to read verse 13 and 14. I'd encourage you in your spare time, go through and read the chapters in between as well. You're not going to get a lot more encouragement than you do in these last few verses, but he's just really saying, he's really trying to convince every single person, believe me, I've been there, I've done that. Take it from me. Don't spend your life doing the things I did, because everything that could have been done has been done, I've done it, and it's meaningless. Verse 13 and 14, he says, Now all has been heard, here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. At the end of everything, through all the joys and the sorrows that he's been, he says this is the conclusion. This is the only place to turn to, the only place to go. Back to, just go back to God. Fear God. And it's not the kind of fear that we talk about when, depending on what culture you came from, when you did something inappropriate, it could have been a cane or a belt. I'm sure none of you have ever experienced that. My parents tell me stories about it. They got the cane. It's not that kind of fear where you're afraid. It's not the kind of fear where you're afraid because, you've overspent on the credit card and your husband is going to find out or your wife's going to find out. It's the kind of fear that resembles reverence, or a kind of fear that one has for someone that they admire and someone that they look up to and aspire to be and are willing to take counsel from. It's that kind of fear that it says, fear God. After everything, the only satisfaction that I ever had in my life, he says, the only time when things were actually good, and we think it was probably before his beloved died, when he was still faithful, when he still followed God, when he still turned to God first for direction, for counsel and wisdom, he says, that is the only satisfaction that one can have in life. When you come to the New Testament, there's a person that most of us are familiar with. I'm just going to read a few verses there. When we come to the New Testament, the God of the Old Testament comes to earth in human form. We know his Greek name, Jesus, Yeshua in Hebrew. And he comes and lives among humanity to show an example, to give hope, to give something better, to turn people's minds back to him. And he describes his purpose for being here, and describes what he offers. John chapter 10 and verse 10. And he says, the thief comes to steal and to kill and to destroy. I've come that they might have life and have it to the full. Jesus says to you and I and to humanity, he says, I created you for eternity. I created you to enjoy. In fact, if you look through the Bible, he actually says, I created you to live a life of pleasure. But the pleasure that gets better, that builds, that constructs, that gets better from day to day, not the pleasure that has side effects that end up destroying and killing you. And he says, that's what I've come to do. I've come to give you that sort of life for it to be better, to the full. If you turn to me, if you trust me, if you become my apprentice, if you learn from me, this is what you can expect to have. Perpetual motion. Power, energy, direction, counsel, support from above that will give you that contentment, the peace, the satisfaction, the ability to go to sleep and fall asleep quickly, to wake up in the morning and look forward to another day, to find joy and satisfaction in the small things in life, and to keep looking forward to each new day. That's what I've come to do. He says, if you let me guide you, if you become my apprentice, this is what I can offer, and this is what I can give you. And then in John 17, he says one more thing. He says that on top of that, I'm not content for you to have this just for 70, 80, 90, 100, maybe 110, 12 years if you're lucky. I'm not content to give you just that. But what I want to do for you is to give you this for what? For eternity. I want to give you the opportunity, the privilege and the joy of experiencing perpetual contentment, perpetual peace, purpose, passion, direction, not just for a few short years here on earth, but throughout eternity, eternal life. Now that sounds really good, doesn't it? And if you typed in eternal life in Google, how many faiths, how many religions, how many gurus, how many spiritual leaders offer exactly the same thing, or a very similar version of it? How many faiths do you go to and they say, come to us and your life will be far worse than before you came? Come to us. We don't offer anything for the future. We can tell you a lot about the past. Come to us and, 6B2 at the local cemetery, rest in peace. How many do that? Why would anyone go to a faith that offers nothing? In fact, every single world religion, whether it's the big five or whether it's every single other one, what do they offer? What do they allure with? Isn't it the same catchphrase? Peace, contentment, happiness, satisfaction, fulfillment. Isn't it the same? If you don't believe me, I'd encourage you to get the Yellow Pages, go on the Yellow Pages website, type in church, and just ring a few and say, why should I come to your church, to your mosque, to your temple, to your religion? Why should I? What do you think you're going to get? Try this sometime. I'd encourage you to do this as a bit of an experiment. You're sick in bed from work, you've got nothing else to do, you're tired of Netflix, you've seen everything on there. Pick up the Yellow Pages, ring them up and say, what do you offer? And they will all offer peace, happiness, prosperity even sometimes, satisfaction, fulfillment. So why should we trust Jesus? Why should we bother? Why should we say, hey, you know what? It's worth giving that a try. There is a major difference between every single religion in the world and Christianity and the Bible. Every other religion, every other faith can talk to us about the past. Some even try to talk to us about the present. And most really do promise the future. But only the Bible, out of any other book in history, has not just talked about the future and said nice things, but actually predicted it and gotten it right again and again. When it's time to decide how to invest your money and you go to a financial planner, how do you decide between the best financial planners? How do you know what stockbroker to use? How do you know whose advice to take when it comes to financial matters? What do you look for? Success. You look for a track record, right? And it's not just financial planning, it's every aspect of our life, whether it's real estate. You know, we sold a house not too long ago and we looked up real estate agents. What are you looking for? Your sales rate. How well are you doing in the market that you're in? So as you compare everybody else in the spiritual world that says, this is what we offer, only the Bible makes predictions and gets it right again and again and again. So if the Bible can make predictions and get the future right, maybe, just maybe, when the God of the Bible, Jesus, says, I've come to give you life and I've come to give it to you more abundantly. And not just in this life, but in the next. Maybe, just maybe. Because he's gotten it right so many times, which can be verified by history, which can be verified by archaeology. The only religious book in the world that gets it right again and again. Maybe we can start to say, what? You know what? It's worth looking into. It's worth giving it a try. It's worth exploring a little bit more. That's why people like Isaac Newton. What you may not know about Isaac Newton is that he spent most of his life studying what? Well, he studied a lot of alchemy, he studied physics, he studied astronomy, but most of his life he spent studying the Bible. He wrote more on his experience with God than he wrote on science. And we could go through a list of many businessmen, many people who have achieved a lot in life, and especially scientists. Modern science is based on the back of Christians who said God is a God of order. The God of the Bible who's predicted the future, like Isaac Newton, who read prophecies and who was persuaded by prophecies that the God of the Bible could be trusted. Today, one of the more well-known academic scientists, Francis Collins, look him up. He led the Genome Project, the first group in the world that were able to sequence DNA. And the list is long. You could go to every university around the world and find leading thinkers that choose to follow Jesus, that choose to believe in the Bible, for many reasons, but primarily and definitely because the Bible has a track record. And with the God of the Bible who has a track record, his invitation is, just try. What do you have to lose? Like Solomon, some of us have tried the other things in life. We've tried physical intimacy. Some of us sometimes even experiment with substances that give us a bit of a rush. Yeah, they give a bit of satisfaction. They do. But it doesn't last. We try with entertainment. You know, you can sit through 3 hours of a movie, and if it's really good, you won't even know the time's gone. At the end of it, how do you feel? Maybe inspired, if it's a true story, but usually pretty empty and flat. Sometimes we try with food. Chocolate fixes almost everything. Relationships, all sorts of other things we try. Jesus says, I know the past, I know the present, I know the future. I could show you in the Bible. And if you'd like to know more about the Bible's predictions, we can look at that some other time. We can talk personally, privately. We can look at it in a public series again. But the invitation is, give me a try. You've got nothing to lose. You've tried everything else and it hasn't panned out. Try. And that's what we're going to spend time talking about over the next tomorrow and next weekend as well. What does it mean to follow Jesus? What does it look like to be an apprentice? How do we do it? How do we experience it? What is in it for me? What do I get out of it? What is expected of me? What is it all about? Tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. we're going to look at the fine print. How do we start following Jesus? Especially when we have regrets, especially when we feel that sometimes we've gone in different directions. What does it take? Do I have to pay money to the local church pastor? Do I have to do penance? What does it look like to begin being an apprentice or a follower of Jesus to actually experience the things that he offers and promises? So that's at 11 a.m., the fine print. And tomorrow afternoon, we're talking about GPS, direction in life. And I'm sure there are some brochures that you'll be able to see with the programs for next weekend as well. Right?
Thanks, Christian. I'd like to invite you to stand with me as we sing our closing song this evening. Oh, let the Son of God enfold you with His Spirit and His love. Let Him fill your heart and satisfy your soul. Oh, let Him have the things that hold you, and His Spirit like a dove will descend upon your life and make you whole. Jesus, oh Jesus.
bow your heads with me as we pray. Father, we thank you for giving us life to begin with. And we thank you for giving us hope in and through Jesus. As we explore what it means to know you and to follow you, what you have done for us, pray that your Spirit may guide our thoughts over this weekend and the next. May you draw us closer to you. May we truly find purpose, meaning, contentment and peace in an experience with you each day. Be with us as we travel home this evening. Keep us safe and an opportunity to spend time again tomorrow. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks for your message. That was really good. For everyone who's come along tonight, we also are serving soup and buns and some sandwiches for dinner as well. So if you want to grab something before you leave or stay and talk, very welcome. And thanks, Roy, as well for your music this evening. For those of you who haven't got a chance to meet Roy yet, Roy and Jinha are both pastors of this church here. We'll be happy to have a chat with you after as well. So thanks. And as Pastor Cristian has said, tomorrow we also have the program at 11. He'll be speaking and at 4 p.m. In between, if you want to stick around, there will also be a lunch and an afternoon activity, or if you want to come back at 4, that's fine too. Lovely, thank you.